All right, assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Hannah. I am a PA and trauma and healing coach for Muslim women. I help Muslim women heal from trauma and reinvent themselves. If that's something you're looking for, you can go to the link in my description, inshallah, to learn more about how to work with me. My next trauma group coaching program, discovery calls are going to be opening up very soon, so I would jump on the waiting list if you're not on it already. I feel like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept sending me signs to make this video because I cannot tell you how many conversations in the past month came up relating to this topic. And it was devastating for me because I was like, what is going on? That we have, I'm sure, well-meaning content creators making content on something that is supposed to be extremely hopeful and beautiful, and instead leading people to disconnect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, leading people to not want to do this particular act of worship, or creating doubt or losing husn al-dhan in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What am I talking about? I'm talking about dua. I had 3 separate clients, 3 or 4 I think, who shared with me that they felt like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wasn't answering their du'as, and that the reason that they felt like their du'a wasn't being answered was because there was something lacking with them, that they weren't making du'a in a way that they believed in it, or they weren't making du'a in a way that was sincere enough so Allah wasn't answering their du'a, right? Or they weren't or Allah is mad about something or angry at them or punishing them for something, so he's withholding the answer to the dua. And I stopped and I was like, where did you get that from? And all of them mentioned something on social media. Now, I came across one video. It was posted by a marriage coach. And I'm sure very well-meaning, but not understanding the intended effects. And I think it's very interesting because sometimes what ends up happening is I'll hear like certain content creators, influencers, and coaches share certain things. And because my clients are dealing with the aftermath of that, I see the unintended consequences. So I get very passionate about that. So we're going to be talking about this. Does Allah not answer your dua when you're not sincere? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala withhold the answer to the dua because you're not believing that it's going to happen? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not answering your dua in the way that you ask it mean that you're being punished, or that he hates you? The answer is no. It's very simple. And I want to say I'm confused as to what has allowed so many Muslims to adopt this mindset that dua has to happen in this particular way. And the only thing that I can pin it down to is the New Age spirituality that we see on social media, especially regarding manifestation. I already made an entire video about this, an entire video debunking manifestation, talking about how we can achieve the results that we are promised to achieve with manifestation through already Islamic means, and why manifestation is actually just the gaslighting of the New Age movement. Let's start off with a few different things. Dua is an act of worship, one of the most beloved acts of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dua is an act of worship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually feels anger towards one who does not do it. But what is dua? We come from this capitalistic, materialistic, me, I want, I get world that we don't even understand what dua actually is. We think, if I was to ask you guys what is dua, most of you guys would say dua is asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, right? So when you go to Allah, right, and you might even say it in a beautiful way, you go to Allah because he's the only one who can provide us, right? He's al-Razaq, he's al-Qadir, he's all of these beautiful names, and we ask him. But that's not what dua is. Yes, there are some duas that incorporate and ask, you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but dua is calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dua is communicating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes that involves asking, and other times it doesn't. Example, there's a beautiful dua that the Prophet ﷺ taught to us, right? رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبَّهِ وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ نَبِيًّا وَرَسُولًا. رَضِيتُ بِاللَّهِ رَبَّهِ. I am pleased with Allah as my Lord. وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا. Right? And I'm pleased with Islam as my deen. And وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ نَبِيًّا وَرَسُولًا. And I am pleased with the Prophet صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم as a prophet and as a messenger. That's a dua. Did anyone find something when I said that? Was there an ask in there? So Ya Allah, give me this. So Ya Allah, provide me with this. No, there was no ask, but it is considered a dua. And in fact, there is a reward for it. There's another hadith that tells us that when we recite this 3 times in the morning and 3 times in the evening, that the person who does that will be pleased on the day of judgment. What does that mean? All right, there's the reward of Jannah, because no one is pleased on the day of judgment if they're going to Jahannam, right? But that's a dua. So let's start off with that. Let's kind of zoom out for a second and think about, could it be that my understanding of dua is distorted? And if I feel negatively towards dua, or I feel, if I feel let down, or I feel disconnected from Allah in regards to dua, perhaps it's my understanding that's an issue, not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Not that I'm not, the fact that I'm doing an act of worship, but my understanding is flawed, and it probably is for most of you guys. You probably never knew this. The intention behind our dua should, no matter, when we do make duas that are asking, it should be that we are seeking the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right, there's a beautiful hadith, another hadith, a very long one, where the Prophet ﷺ was giving advice to a young man. He said, if you seek help from Allah, right? And that we understand that the outcome of the dua, that right there, we disconnect from, right? Because even if our heart deeply wants something, it may be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has something better. And this brings me back to my second nuance in regards to dua, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not answering your dua doesn't mean He's not answering your dua. What is answering your dua? Giving you exactly what you asked for, the way you asked for it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 3 ways that He answers duas, and the Prophet ﷺ explained those 3 ways to us. Number 1, He gives us what we ask for. It might be immediately, it might be 10 years down the line, but you get it in the dunya. Number 2 is Allah diverts a calamity from your path. Something was destined to come to you. It was going to harm you, and Allah diverts it. And number 3 is that we get the reward of our dua on the day of judgment, and that is the best one. That is the one where we are going to wish that all of our duas were never answered once we see that reward. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who enter Jannah. Ameen. And are protected from any of the punishments of the grave, of Yawm al-Qiyamah, and of the Akhirah. So we need to start coming to our dua more with that understanding. There have been so many times where something harmful was just about to happen, and I just stopped and I thought, and it didn't, and I thought, subhanallah. Like, I'll give you an example. I remember I was cutting something with a knife, and I think maybe my hands were oily because I had like cooking oil on them, and the knife slipped right out of my hand. And the knife, as it was coming down, there was no way for me to move my foot away fast enough. Literally, it was impossible. The space between where it fell and it getting to my foot, it was too quick for me to react. And I just literally looked. Like, in that instance, it was almost like my brain was like, okay, we're about to go to the ER, right? Because I'm probably going to need some crazy stitches because there's a knife that's about to be in my foot. And literally, I watched the knife. So imagine this is a sharp side of the knife, and this is like the handle. It was going like that, and I swear to you, I watched it flip like this. I'm not exaggerating. And the back of the knife bounced, and then that sharp part spun one more time, and it nicked my skin, so I was bleeding. But it avoided all the veins and arteries, which for me, I was sad because I knew exactly where it was about to hit. All right. And I literally, at that moment, I just said, Alhamdulillah. Because I immediately thought, Ya Allah, which dua did I make That was the reason that this calamity was diverted for me. That was the reason that I didn't just bleed out, because there's a very powerful artery in our foot that we can feel. It's called the dorsalis pedis artery. What dua did I make? And I came to that moment with such gratitude. I actually shared that moment with my group coaching client, because I was like, this is like one of those moments in life where you really tune into your iman and you realize like the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ was true. That Allah diverts the calamity from you. But we need to understand that sometimes our dua is not going to get answered. And it's not because Allah is angry at us. It's not because Allah hates us. But it's because the dua is going to be answered in a different way that is best for us. And we as Muslims trust, we have tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by the way, let's hop on that for a second. Tawakkul is not that you sit there and make dua and you trust Allah is going to give it to you. That's not tawakkul. Anyone who tells you that that's tawakkul, it's nonsense. This is manifestation nonsense. Tawakkul means that you trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because He deserves to be trusted, not because the outcome is going to come out the way you are. How arrogant are we to think that? If we truly think that, right? We should have a, Ya Allah, I know of certain truths. I know that you are the opener, Al-Fatah. I know you are Al-Qadir, you are the all-capable. I know you are Al-Razzaq, right, the provider. I know you are Al-Wali, the protector. I know you are Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the most beneficent, the most merciful. I know these things about you. Because I know these things about you, Ya Allah, I'm asking. And we sit there content, ready to receive what Allah gave us, but simultaneously ready to understand when Allah says no. It is easier said than done, but I wish we could shift our thinking just a little bit around that. Another thing, right, is do you have to show up to dua in every single moment with this heightened level of sincerity, with this heightened level of like just like majesty, like I'm going to make dua and I'm going to do it with so much heart? And so no, you don't. Because first of all, that's hard. That's almost impossible for someone to show up with that level of intensity every single time. We are human beings. We get tired, we get stressed out, we get mentally tapped out. Our iman fluctuates. Where was this prerequisite of sincerity in any of the verses around? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا سَأَلَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِي إِذَا دَعَانِي. If my slave asks about me, I am near. I answer the call of the caller when he calls me or she calls me. Where in that was the prerequisite of when they call me with sincerity and crying and knees on the floor shaking and, waking up for tahajjud at 3 a.m. every single time they need to make it. Where's that prerequisite? It doesn't exist, because Allah knows that even the steps that we take to call Him is a testimony to our trust in Him. There have been times where you and I both can think of where we didn't feel like making dua, but we made it anyways. And the problem with this idea of it has to come from this deep place of sincerity or it's not going to get answered is, what do people do? They just don't make dua when they don't feel that sincerity or they can't muster up that emotional intensity. And so then they don't make dua. So then they're leaving an act of worship that is beautiful and even it brings barakah in their life because of that. And I had so many of my clients who were like, yeah, I just stopped making dua. And I was like, make dua anyways. Make dua not because you want something. Make dua because Allah deserves to be called to. Make dua and then watch how Allah answers your dua or which ones get answered, even though you didn't have that intensity. Like, look at what a testimony to Allah's mercy that is. That there have been times, like I said, I made dua for something in passing. I was like, I don't feel very strongly, but I know if I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will hear me. And so I asked, Ya Allah, XYZ. There was no magnificent, poetic dua. There were no, emotional words exchanged. It was, Ya Allah, the formula. Ya Allah, I'm in need of you. I use a name. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for whatever it is that I intended to ask. I ended it with Ameen and Salawat on the Prophet. And then it would happen. Allah would answer the dua. And I would just stop and think, like, how merciful is my Rabb? Like, how merciful is my Rabb that He answered this dua even when I didn't think twice about it. And there are some times where you desperately know you need or want something. As another really good example is like when you're low on iman. You're low on iman. Where's the sincerity gonna come from? Where's that intense emotion gonna come from? The problem is you don't have that. Do you just not make dua because you think your dua is not going to get accepted? No, you make dua. And just that act of, remember the hadith of when you walk towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He runs to you, right? This idea of when we put in effort, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates that effort and He gives us so much more back. Show up to your du'as like that. No longer treating it like it needs to be this theatrical show. No longer sitting there thinking that it's inconvenient, because it can literally be a sentence-long dua. But as long as you're calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should never be allowing ourselves to take an act of worship and distance ourselves from it. If anyone's advice on social media is making you less likely to engage in a beautiful act of worship, especially one that is as low-hanging fruit as dua is, drop that advice. We should be trying to look for ways to make it easier for us, not more difficult for us. Right? I'm not talking about fard or farad. I'm talking about things that are, nawafil, things that are extra good deeds. We should be trying to figure out ways. If someone's saying that your sadaqah doesn't matter unless you're putting in this much time, and this much money, and you feel like it hurts to lose it, and there's sincerity, even if you have 50 cents to give to put into those little coin, boxes at the restaurant while you're picking up your food, put it in there. The blessing from that doesn't disappear. Sure, it would be much more reward if you did it with more sincerity, or it was more intense, or there was more of a sacrifice. But it doesn't mean that you have to completely let go of the act of worship because of that. We can't be all or nothing Muslims. Allah is so gracious. He rewards us for even the smallest of things that we do. So take that mindset. So anyone who's watching this, if there's anything that you take away from this, make dua even if when you don't have emotion, because the act of calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أستجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعاني. I answer the call of the caller when he or she calls me. That's it. All you have to do is call. It doesn't have to be this extraordinary, obviously we want to aim for that. I'm not saying that there's no goodness in that, or that's not the better way. It definitely is a better way to be sincere, to be authentic, to be emotional, right? But even something that's a lower benchmark, if it's still allowing us to worship, it's better than leaving it altogether. I hope that was helpful for you guys. And if you enjoyed it, then please like this video and comment below, inshallah. Share your thoughts on this. It helps this video to reach so many more Muslims and help so many more people. And once again, if you're a Muslim woman who is looking for a coach, then you can go to the link in my description to work with me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.